I guess us Xenoblade fans were really good last year, because San Takahashi didn't just give us a brand new game announcement at last week's Nintendo Direct. We were also given announcements for Nintendo Switch 2 editions for all 3 numbered Xenoblade games to go with X's, which released back in March, so we're going to have upgrades for all of them before Genesis releases. And on top of that, unlike X's, these contain new content. The upgrade for Xenoblade 1DE released the day of the Direct, Xenoblade 2s will be releasing July 30th, and Xenoblade 3s on December 3rd, so we're actually going to be getting new Xenoblade content every few months until 2027, bringing us into the calendar year where Genesis will release, which is kind of crazy. It's almost like XDE is getting a DLC pass, similar to 2 and 3, which fills out the next year with new stuff, except each wave is a separate purchase, and because XDE itself already launched with new stuff to X, we're getting additions to the numbered games instead. So, obviously I wanted to focus on the Genesis trailer when the Direct first came out. Really burned myself out on that one, because that video was done in 33 hours, and it is an hour and 45 minutes long. Do the math on that. But I did also want to analyze and speculate about what I could from the trailer for the Switch 2 editions for the numbered games, as well as give a brief review of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition Nintendo Switch 2 edition, to inform any purchasing decisions you might be making, and gain a bit more clues for how 2 and 3 are going to perform. I do want to start with that review, but first a word of warning for physical purchasers, as in, you're planning on picking up a new physical copy of the Switch 2 edition, or are buying the game for the first time and want it physical. Xenoblade 1DE and 2 are going to have their physical releases delayed by a substantial amount from their digital releases. The upgrade patch for 1DE, as well as the full digital Switch 2 version, are already up on the eShop, but the physical version will not be releasing until July 30th. Which is the same day the digital version and upgrade patch for Xenoblade 2 will release, but the physical for that won't be releasing until October 1st. Xenoblade 3, however, both versions of that will be releasing on December 3rd, 2026, which is only an unfortunate date because it just barely misses Xenoblade 2's 9th anniversary of release, and the 11th anniversary of Xenoblade X's original Western release on the Wii U. This is kind of just an is-what-it-is scenario, so I can't really get too mad at this. Something similar happened with XDE as well, but just keep that in mind if you're planning on getting into the Xenoblade series and are going to be a physical player, you are going to have to wait a bit from the digital-only people unless you just get the physical Switch 1 version and apply the upgrade patch to that. I don't like the Switch 2 box arts as much as the Switch 1 box arts, but as you will be seeing later, I don't have nearly as negative of an opinion of Xenoblade 1DE Switch 2 edition as I did for XDE's. So honestly, I might still pick up physical copies for these anyway, because I don't think they're a paid downgrade like X's was. That being said, let's discuss 1DE. Honestly, just because of the footage I have, plus the fact that I need to go to some later game areas, I am going to need to spoil up through the 7th party member in that game, which is one of the big spoilers from Xenoblade 1, so beware of that. You may remember that my issues with XDE Switch 2 edition come from, especially in handheld mode, the way the resolution is upscaled, and the fact that there was no new content despite it being a paid release. While 1DE's upgrade is twice as much, being $10 instead of $5, and presumably 2 and 3s will follow suit, it does at least somewhat rectify those issues. First, as for the performance. While this at its core Wii game does not run at 4K 60 FPS, the way its visuals are up-res for the Switch 2 edition is leaps and bounds beyond how X's were done, even if it seems to be using similar techniques. This is especially noticeable in handheld mode, where despite the resolution being the same in both games, you're not going to get a better picture using the Switch 1 edition in boost mode like you would on X. Visuals seem clearer unless you really zoom in, when shimmery lines and weird edges were prevalent everywhere in XDE, even when zoomed all the way out in docked mode. It is worth noting that the file sizes for all the upgrades are massive, basically doubling the size of each game, which isn't an issue if you're just picking up the physical Switch 2 editions, but if you're patching them in any way, you might need to worry a little bit about space on your system or SD card. And while a lot of it might just be that they didn't compress the Switch 2 patches nearly as well as they did the original games themselves, and all 3 upgrades are including new voice acting, there are definitely some assets, mostly on outfits and weapons as far as I could tell, that do feature improved textures or higher polygon counts. Once again though, as a sidebar, while you can see the improved frame rate for yourself on my recording, you won't be able to see any resolution improvements directly because I am only recording this in 1080p. I do not have a higher definition capture card yet. You might notice that I barely use any footage of XDE in my videos about XDE. Well, that was actually because I was expecting there to be a Switch 2 edition much sooner than there actually was, and I was going to wait for that, then record an entire full playthrough of the game so I have footage of every single thing I could ever need. Then the Switch 2 edition took a year, and I didn't think it was good enough to be worth doing that for. However, 1DE's upgrade has restored my faith effectively, and the visuals are actually improved enough where I'm going to have to do that and going to start recording every single cutscene in the game, so I'm never going to have to go back and record individual scenes in the future. So while the visuals themselves are not perfect, they are a massive upgrade over the Switch 1 version, but how is the frame rate? In XDE, it was a mostly consistent 60 FPS with some dips to the mid to low 50s on occasion, but a lot of UI elements, certain animations, and QuickTime events still ran at 30, which gave things a lot choppier look than actually was. Well, unfortunately 1DE's does not run as well as X. In most cases, it is a pretty solid 60, and I haven't noticed as many UI issues or things that are still at 30. However, the frame drops are much more prevalent and much more noticeable. You're probably seeing some on screen right now, as while a lot of early game areas are fine, once you get to later ones, Satoral Marsh, Aerith Sea, a little bit of Alak Mountain, especially the Fallen Arm, it's not great. And you're gonna see drops basically back down to 30 to the point where I kind of wish there was a locked 30 mode even for this version. If there's a lot of stuff on screen during combat too, you might also see some lag, which can also screw up your QuickTime event sometimes, though in a different way than how that happens in XDE, though it is a little bit funny. In this case, the lag in combat is a lot closer to how the Wii version would lag, so I still kind of have muscle memory for QuickTime events that don't move as fast as you think they would move. So this almost brought combat a little bit closer to how I was used to from the original, but objectively it should not be this way. The original Xenoblade 2 lagged this badly sometimes on Switch 1, so I'm really hoping we don't get issues like that, considering a game that didn't lag at all on Switch 1 like 1DE is having all of these issues on Switch 2. Haven't seen any issues with cutscenes at least, so as far as my archival efforts are concerned, I don't have to worry there. This is by far the biggest issue with the Switch 2 edition, and I wouldn't consider it a deal breaker on its own because it's not like it goes below 30, but it is a major stain on a Switch 2 edition for the second time in a row. We had one version with really bad visual issues, and one with pretty bad frame rate issues, when both of those were the definitive editions of games from before the Switch 1. So upcoming we have two games that were built from the ground up for the Switch 1, and I'm supposed to expect that those will have less issues? It is really concerning, and it's honestly a very big stain on Monolith Soft's otherwise spectacular record when it comes to pushing Nintendo hardware and pulling off massive technical achievements on weaker consoles. And you can't really hide behind, oh, it was probably an outsourced patch this time because Monolith did make brand new content for this. But how is that brand new content? Well, just based on what we've seen in the trailer, which we will be getting to, it looks like 1DE is getting the least new stuff out of all three games. So what did they have to offer here? Well, the first thing is just a massive upgrade to pre-existing content. And that is that every single heart-to-heart in the game, as well as all of the quiet moments in Future Connected, has now been fully voiced, bringing back every single original voice actor to reprise their roles, with many of them returning to them for the first time in 16 years. Now, obviously, everyone's going to sound a bit different because of the large amount of time that's passed, but it's still amazing they got everyone back, both English and Japanese by the way, and voiced such a massive amount of text, bringing 1 up to parity with 2, which always had voiced heart-to-hearts. I can never call a release that gives us a voiced version of Check Out This Massive Plant all bad. What's the new stuff then? Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but Xenoblade Kart is finally real. A new vehicle called the Etherjet has been added to the game, allowing for faster travel throughout the overworld, and you can also race them against NPC versions of your other party members and do time trials that can get you 2 colors of a new outfit for each character, as well as Napon Stones, the currency from the Land of Challenge, so you have another outlet to get the other stuff new to DE. So how do I feel about this? Well, for the most part, I think it is just dumb fun. Like, yeah, they didn't make it multiplayer, so you can't play Xenoblade Kart with your friends online, like they would add an online mode to a single-player RPG just for that. And yeah, there's only 5 tracks with 2 versions, depending on if you're doing the race or the time trial, but it's a dumb JRPG minigame. The genre used to be known for that, and so few new releases, especially AAA ones like Xenoblade, have them. With the exception of Tiger Tiger in 2, the Blade series hasn't had minigames at all, only different kinds of combat challenges. So viewing this as the Xeno series' second janky, kinda dumb, but also undoubtedly charming JRPG minigame since Hackhawks in 2006 means I definitely approve of it. But I've also gone on the record to state that I think Xenoblade 1 has some of the weaker level design in the series, leading to a lot of big open spaces with not a lot of things to do in them. So, does the Etherjet improve that issue? The thing is, not every area in Xenoblade 1 I think suffers from that problem. And unlike Xenoblade X, which was designed from the ground up to have you explore it on foot and then later in a much faster vehicle, 1's world design, flawed as I think it may be, is predicated on the fact that you are only exploring it on foot with no sprint button and at most a 25% boost from quickstep gems. With the sole exception of the big open spaces, this does not gel well at all with giving you a hoverboard that has a boost button. You're not exactly going to be moving very faster around the game's tighter areas. Also, speaking of those, why is the climb up to Outlook Park the finale of the race stage in Colony 9? It's literally a bunch of right angles with very short straightaways between them. I'm not quite sure what the thought process there was. And moving quickly through areas with a high asset density like Magna Forest is just going to make the frame rate dips even worse. You can also get the Etherjet as soon as you make it to the refugee camp, which in my opinion is way too early to get it, because I don't think there are any areas in the game that really would benefit your exploration to have a much faster movement option beyond maybe a sprint toggle that gives you 50% of a boost, until Aerith C. So, most of Bionis Leg, all of Satoral Marsh and Magna Forest, you can now basically trivialize any of the interesting exploration with your fancy new mount, to say nothing of the well-designed tighter areas later in the game. Yeah, it is a godsend for exploring the entirety of Aerith Sea, so you don't have to swim for 15 minutes to get to certain secret areas. And it's great if you happen to fall off inside the Bionis interior, you can get back to the jet that brings you up to the land level without dying in many more cases. But in a game with skip travel that never puts you more than a couple minutes walk away from basically anywhere you need to go, I don't think this is something you should be given that early on in a game that wants you to explore at your own pace. I think maybe getting it post Mechanis Core or as a New Game Plus reward would be fine, because I'm not opposed to it existing in the normal overworld at all, but for that much of the main story to just have a faster option instead of being able to slow down and take in all the sights doesn't really do it for me. In X, it's fine that you get the Skell so early on in the game, then later get Flight after that, because you're not likely to have explored much of the world. There are a lot of places you can't get to without a Skell or Flight. And just the act of traversing is so fun in X that I'll often skip travel to someplace further away from my destination or not skip travel at all, which isn't something I could really see happening with the Etherjet in 1. I do think a timed sprint would have been a great addition, but I think this is too fast to alleviate the problems I have with 1's level design, and just makes problems in the opposite direction instead. So overall, I definitely think the upgrade is worth it if you're planning on playing a lot more Xenoblade 1 on the Switch 2, and I think the Switch 2 edition is absolutely worth it if you're going to play the game for the first time on that system. Especially because you can get a physical Switch 1 copy for a lot less than MSRP nowadays, and while you will still have to pay the upgrade, it's going to be a lot less than buying a full-price Switch 2 physical copy, which does now cost as much as a normal price Switch 2 game at $70 USD or equivalents elsewhere. It's Xenoblade 1 with, at worst, net neutral additions. No matter how critical I am of certain aspects, it's impossible to spin that as not worth your time, at least if it's your first playthrough. So that's 1 done, let's take a look at 2 and 3. Xenoblade 2's boasted additions are Control Blades in new action battles, new Rare Blade and Blade Quest, and new equipment designs for Pyra and Mithra, while 3 advertises new defensive battles against waves of enemies, new Hero and Hero Quest, and newly voiced event scenes. The new Blade and Hero are equivalents to each other across games, so we're going to save those for last and speculate about both at the same time. Let's talk about Xenoblade 2's new combat mode first, the one where you get to control blades directly. We can see a short clip of it, where the player is controlling Zenobia, and on the bottom of the screen we can see that the party also has Percival, Adenine, Azami, Perun, and Florin in it. The party has a shared HP bar. There's an unknown icon in the middle of the list of blades, where a talent art would be in Xenoblade 1, and we can see that each blade appears to have some sort of charge building up as an art would around their icon, as well as their role and element listed, so those will presumably play into how this combat works. There's a timer in the upper left, a mission objective, defeat all enemies in the upper right, and the player is targeting a level 33 Little Bunnet. There are new gauges as well, in attack 1 33%, armor 10%, and recharge 2 23%. It seems like, similar to the pickups you could get in Xenoblade 2's regular challenge mode from its old DLC, defeating and probably inflicting smash on enemies will cause them to drop pickups that raise all three of these attributes, as we can see yellow, blue, and red orbs matching the three colors of those new gauges, as well as health potions on the ground. From what we can tell, you select each of the 6 blades like you would be selecting an art in Xenoblade 1 or X, so I have to assume the middle icon turns into some sort of super attack like a talent art or overdrive later. And the green bar filling up around them is not the special meter, as an icon for special is over all 6 blades' heads, but some of them build and spend all of their meter without being switched to or the special icon going away, so it seems like that's just some kind of big attack they can build up to. These are referred to as action battles, so it is possible there might be some more action RPG styled combat than traditional Xenoblade fare in this, but that remains to be seen. It's quite possible you have a regular attack button for the first time in the series, use that to build up the green meter on your blade, that can be spent on a bigger ability, and then you get a special which you can activate with the X button. It seems like swapping which blade you're controlling works exactly the same as swapping party members in Xenoblade 3, which does track. It looks like they're putting a bit of 3's combat engine into 2 with the whole 6 party member thing. And it seems like also similar to how 3's talent arts were built up, there's some kind of roll action, as underneath the logo for the game, we can see a light green tag that says roll pop up over Zenobia before switching to Percival. Couldn't tell you if this builds special, if this builds the green meter, or some other thing, maybe the gauge in the middle, especially because no special is used during this brief clip at all. So I really can't tell you exactly how this is going to play, other than it's going to be substantially different than main game Xenoblade 2. We can also see a lock icon over a wood treasure chest in the background, which could just signify you can't open it until all the enemies are beaten, but maybe some chests are locked unless you complete an additional objective. The narration for the trailer itself calls these mercenary squad battles, and considering there are 6 blades on the field at a time, this seems like a playable version of Merc missions, which were a purely time-based thing in the original game. I doubt this is just turning every combat-related Merc mission in the game into something playable, but it might be another way to get certain rewards from stuff like that, by actively doing something in-game rather than just waiting around. My guess would be this gives you Land of Challenge currency instead of completing objectives for the main game, unless it's doing things for Merc mission related stuff, but it could be possible that this is another way to build out Blade's affinity charts, build affinity itself, or something beyond just pure money and reputation. It's likely you'll need to do something specific with either the new Blade being added, or these missions in order to get the new outfits for Pyra and Mithra. And there are many options for what these could be. Could it be some sort of crossover from another Xeno game, or like put Mithra in Angela's outfit from Expelled from Paradise because they look very similar to each other? Yeah, it's probably just going to be the outfits from the picture. Those designs already exist even if they haven't been fully modeled yet. You know what I'm talking about. It's that simple. Either way though, there were animations and voice lines for controlling blades on the field similar to how they work in Torn of the Golden Country, and it looks like some of those are finally going to get used in this new mode. Plus, playable Finch has me extremely excited. I wish there was more to analyze and speculate about here, but we did only get a small clip, and we're gonna find out everything in a bit over a month's time anyway, so I'm not too pressed about that. We also unfortunately get an equally small clip for Xenoblade 3, which is not until December, but from that I can reasonably glean what this new defensive battle mode is going to be, and it's Vampire Survivors. The mode in 3 seems like it's going to be a lot more automated than the one in 2, as the only things that appear to be button prompts for the player to actually control are the green icons for your party members in the lower right-hand corner, replacing 3's normal arts palette. Each party member has their own HP bar, but it looks like the party's level is what's shared this time, as there's a blue level 15 bar in the upper left that raises to level 16 later in the clip. There's also a red bar in the upper right-hand corner that starts at 15, then when the clip cuts it goes to 19, and is raised to 20 when the player gets an option to choose an upgrade. So it seems like filling that bar is how you get party passive upgrades, while filling the blue bar is simply increasing your character's levels. We can also see red, blue, and green pickups on the fields during this clip, so it seems like the green gauges that show each of the party members' faces can be used to activate a talent art or some other special ability, blue pickups are experience, and red pickups are upgrade experience. Just looking at this, it is hard to tell if the player is controlling the camera or controlling Noah's position, presumably him because he's the first member listed in the party, but either way, it doesn't seem like you're going to have a lot of control over your character's moment-to-moment actions, and progression is more a test of your team building through these randomized upgrades, even compared to the Archsage's Gauntlet, which, yes, while it did also have a lot of roguelike elements and randomized upgrades, you did at least go in with one party member using the build you made for them in the main game, so that was at least under your control. But in this case, it seems like all you get to do is pick one member of the main party. Crucially though, the party composition is more mixed than it has ever been before, as the clip starts with Noah, Ashira, and Lanz, but after gaining an upgrade, the player chooses to add Tyon to the team, making for a party of 1 hero and 3 normal party members. Now granted, when Tyon is added to the party, there are 4 party member icons in the lower right corresponding to each of the 4 face buttons on your controller, so it is possible the maximum party size in this is 4, but either way, it seems like you can choose to mix and match between members of Ouroboros and heroes in a way you couldn't in the Archsage's Gauntlet, which limited you to 1 party member and only recruiting heroes, or the main game, which forced you to have 6 party members and 1 hero. The official site for the Switch 2 upgrade describes these as defensive battles, so I'm not sure if it's just in the sense of there will be waves of enemies attacking you and all you need to do is survive or defeat the boss as the objective is listed in the clip, or if you're actively doing tower defense and trying to defend a certain point. But either way, it seems like this is in even more pseudo-endless mode than the Gauntlet was, allowing you to build up things in a roguelike way in a different sense. And although nothing is listed, I am assuming that you can get Land of Challenge currency from this as well, and that can be spent on both old and new items. Granted, you can buy these upgrade patches for 2 and 3 without buying the DLC passes for those games, which contain the Land of Challenge in the first place, whereas in 1DE the Land of Challenge always comes with the game, so direct Land of Challenge integration could be done with the Switch 2 patch, but maybe there's going to be one Nopon merchant who handles Switch 2 stuff outside of the Land of Challenge, and then that stuff is also simply added to the inventory of Land of Challenge merchants, as well if you do have the DLC or something like that. Either way, I am excited for both of these new battle modes, and I can easily see myself sinking a lot of time into both of these to keep my fix going until Genesis comes out. The only other thing advertised for Xenoblade 3 is new voiced event scenes, and I don't know what that means. That could be voicing content that is already in the game, or it could be brand new content that is voiced. If we're talking about adding voice acting, similar to Xenoblade 1's Heart to Hearts, it basically has to be the camp conversations in 3, because that is basically the only dialogue outside of regular side quests that isn't voiced. 3 already has an extremely comprehensive and extremely impressive amount of voice acting in it, to the point where that's basically the only thing you can add voice acting to without adding completely new stuff. If it is completely new stuff, I have no idea what this means. Could it be a slight new piece of story? Maybe. There's already going to be a new hero in Hero Quest, and that's presumably going to be as voiced as all the previous ones were. But if they're adding other new scenes, who knows what that means? Maybe a short side quest chain to clear up some other unanswered questions with Xenoblade 3, or reveal information that was only present in the Japan-only art book for everyone? Revealing new information or making more explicit connections between the numbered games and X? Introducing concepts and ideas that may be relevant in Genesis? I'm not sure. Personally, I'm leaning towards they're just voicing all the camp conversations, in part because I don't really know what new event scene really means, and also because I don't want to get people's hopes up. But if there is new stuff, that would also be extremely exciting, even if it's just more generic slice of life stuff where we get to hang out with the cast of Xenoblade 3 more. I don't think many people would complain about that either. Now though, we arrive at the important question. Who's the new Rare Blade in 2, and who's the new hero in 3? And for that, I will be spoiling every single Xenoblade game that is out currently. The way I see it, there are 4 categories that these 2 characters could fall into. Number 1. A character that could have been a Blade or hero already in the base game or DLC, but just wasn't. Number 2. Completely new Glupshidos that have nothing to do with anything. Number 3. A guest or fan service character from another game in the series. And number 4. Foreshadowing for Xenoblade Genesis. Category 1 I think is honestly kind of the lamest option, and not because it wouldn't be cool to have such characters playable, but because it's kind of a feel-bad for that to be locked behind with basically a second set of DLC for the game, instead of being in it already when these games came out years ago. This would be characters like Jin and Malos in Xenoblade 2, or Mwamba in Xenoblade 3. If it is something like that in 2, it would be an interesting change of pace, because while in New Game Plus you can recruit most of the other antagonist blades besides Jin and Malos, they do not have their own blade quests, while we know for sure this new one is going to have one. So if it is one of the major antagonists of the game, that would be pretty neat. I'd personally lean towards Malos, because if you wanted more character exploration for Jin, you can play Torn of the Golden Country. Either way though, Jin and Malos have complete driver movesets as NPC party members for Chapter 1. Jin also has a later playable moveset, and a complete moveset from Torna, and most of the assets for using them as blades probably do already exist, again, especially Jin from Torna. So it wouldn't be a lot more work to make them fully playable, you just need 4 sets of driver animations, and even then, they probably would be a clone of another weapon type. As for 3, the only heroes in the game who do not have hero quests or similar content are Shulk and Rex, who only come from beating Future Redeemed, so it would make sense for any new base game hero to have a full quest and stuff like that, as we do already know the new one is going to have, even if it is Wamba, because he wouldn't be non-canon like all of the Torna Blades in 2, since he does get reborn during the main story of 3, so if you were able to recruit him, you could just do it after that point in time. He does also already have a unique class, and effectively a full moveset for functioning as an NPC hero from the beginning of Chapter 1, so again, you would just need to make the party member moveset for his class. Though I'm not entirely sure how they would make a second DPS gun class unique from Gray's Full Metal Jaguar, which already does exist. Again though, while I have no problems with Wombing Time being real, I think it should have happened already. Remember when we all thought Wamba, Nimue, and Urien would be free additions to the hero roster, and that never happened? Something like that. I think it should be something new, and not just stuff that could have existed already in a free or a pre-existing DLC update to the game. Option 2 of completely new characters is definitely the funniest, and honestly one I wouldn't complain about at all, purely because they could do literally anything. They're not beholden to any pre-existing thing in the series, and can just design a neat weapon, neat character concept, or neat playstyle, and not have to worry about being beholden to anything they already have done in any game or will be doing in the future. As entirely down for this as I'd be, I don't really have anything else to say about it because I can't predict what a brand new character would be like, and even their Blade/Hero quest doesn't necessarily have to be some big lore revelation. It could be a small self-contained story, or expanding on other things that weren't completely explored in the original main games. So there's that. Options 3 and 4 are I know the ones everyone is expecting this to be, though I am again going to say to not get your hopes up, nowhere did they say it had to be something like this. So, what characters from other Xeno games could appear in 2 and 3? Well, by the time 2's original DLC pass finished, it already had characters from every other Xeno game in it, with the exception of Xenogears, and I don't think a Gears character is going to happen anytime soon, so we can safely ignore that. That means the only options would be another character from Xenosaga or Xenoblade 1 who already have 2 blades, a second character from X, or backporting a character from Xenoblade 3. For X, I think the only reasonable option would be bringing in Al, especially because Elma's relationship and connection to him only first really started getting foreshadowed in her dialogue when she was added to Xenoblade 2, and this would also be promoting the new re-release of the least popular Xenoblade game in a new upgraded version of the most popular Xenoblade game. But beyond that, I can't really justify adding him because I can't see what new unique things you could do by adding him to the game. Elma already brought Overdrive, which is the main mechanic of Xenoblade X, so unless you wanted to somehow incorporate Skells into combat, when the fun thing about Al is the fact that he gives you Hercules' Blow and not anything that has to do with even the full version of the Ares Prime, doesn't really strike me as super interesting, and while it may be neat to have him talk about the land of Moritha and Elysium and compare that to his Earth, that already kind of happened with Elma, and any interactions he would have with her would just be relitigating stuff we already saw in XDE Chapter 13, so I personally wouldn't have a lot of interest in that. If we're bringing a Xenoblade 3 character in, you do have to keep in mind all of the guest characters are non-canon to 2, so it doesn't have to be someone who already existed at the time of 2, which would basically limit the options to A and Melia, and I already said another Xenoblade 1 character doesn't make sense, although A probably shouldn't count as from 1. This means it could be literally anyone from 3 that we choose, and I don't know who the best option to bring into 2 would be. I'm going to talk about Mithra Kid here because they could theoretically be the character brought in from 3 to 2 if they do that, and a lot of people have mentioned them as an option for the new hero in 3. I don't think we're getting Mithrakid. I think they had room in the story for 2 children from that family, one in base game and one in Future Redeemed, and they picked the 2 character designs they wanted to use most, put them in there, and Mithrakid is just someone. If we visit the world post-3 again, we will probably see who this character is, but just because they are the descendant of important characters from a previous game, doesn't mean there's anything significant or important about them in the stories that have existed already. Were they probably a soldier in Ionios, like the other 2? Absolutely. But unless there's a hugely significant thing they haven't told us about yet, putting Mithrakid in would basically just be done for the sake of finding out who Mithrakid is, which I know is enough for some people, but isn't really for me if the choice behind these 2 new characters is going to be fan service. Now, in the defense of that choice, it would be cool seeing younger Rex interact with one of his future children, which is a completely different dynamic than he had with Glimmer in Future Redeemed. And if they want to show a different dynamic, then adding a different kid than Glimmer probably makes the most sense. And since Mio's weapon type already exists in the game, Mithrakid would make the most sense there. But that's really the only neat point I can bring up. Honestly speaking, that kind of means there's more justification to put Mithrakid in 2 than 3, which is not what I expected going into this portion of the video. As for anyone else from 3 being put in 2, genuinely just take your pick. It doesn't matter. Anyone else would pretty much have the same effect regardless, as long as it's someone from 3. I think it might be cool adapting a Keves character into a purely Xenoblade 2 playstyle, and bringing Senna in would allow for another actually good shield hammer, which would be kind of neat, as well as possibly exploring her origins, since she also seems to be descended from Xenoblade 2 characters. But beyond that, anyone from 3 would really have the same effect. As for the new character being added to 3, you have your choice from basically every Xenoblade game, and it would be someone interesting because the only characters from other games in 3 are ones that are in their Xenoblade 3 era design. So if you bring in someone from 1 and 2 with their original design, not time skipping them to fit in with the world of 3, that's already something neat and unique for the game. Now, admittedly, there aren't a lot of playstyles from 1 and 2 that don't already exist in at least one class in 3, so I'm not sure who the best choice for this would be, but it would be a neat thing to have. Elwa's class is already in 3, so Al makes more sense there than in 2, because he'd play a bit more unique, and his connections to the Rift and the Collective Unconscious, as well as Ares' connections to Origin and Ouroboros, would be very interesting to explore by isekaiing him into another world similar to the ones he visited on the way to Mira. The other good answer to put in 3 is absolutely Malos, because we know he was around in Origin Metal form. It would be kind of a way to have N playable because he was the one who gave N power. You could, I guess, also bring in N because he functions as a not in the party list hero during part of the final battle and Future Redeemed and all that too. Malos! Everyone wants Malos back. Put him in something. If he's not going to be in Genesis, put him in 3. There you go. Pretty easy. Don't really have anything else to say there. Could you also put someone from Saga as well in 3? Yeah, I guess. But who from Saga would you add besides Cosmos? And putting Cosmos in somewhere as a non-canon guest character isn't super special when she already has a semi-canon version in 2. Not really a point to doing that, in my opinion. And then we arrive at option 4. Foreshadowing or a guest character from Genesis. In my opinion, there's a chance that putting Al or Malos in either game would also be foreshadowing for Genesis, but they're pre-existing characters, that doesn't really count as much. And I hate to break it to you, but we are almost certainly not getting something like this for 2, regardless of anything else I said, and that's because the 2 Switch 2 edition comes out very soon, as in much sooner than we could reasonably expect to see more information on Xenoblade Genesis. So unless the only information the new character in 2 says is stuff that was pretty obvious from the trailer already, I can't see them adding a character from Genesis until we at least have a big blurb or something about the game and a lot more information about the world and general overall plot. Could I see Eleanor making it into 3 in December? Absolutely. Did Elma technically foreshadow XDE when she was put in 2 in 2018? Yes, she did. However, that was at a time when we as fans, and I think Monolith also, didn't expect X to ever get a follow-up in any sense. So we thought that was just teasing a little bit of information about what would have been if more X stuff was allowed to happen, which I think is a very different story than Genesis, which we already know is coming out next year. I also think having a returning character from another game do the foreshadowing would be playing the hand a little bit too much this early on, and could also pretty easily hint at that character returning. So like, if Malos shows up in 2, and is all of a sudden saying things that remind us of things from Genesis, without them being more easily explained by a reference to 3 or Saga or whatever, that would be playing their hand way too much and pretty easily just straight up saying Malos is coming back and that kind of thing. So, yeah. Again, weird way to end the video, but that's kind of all I have, honestly. Eleanor stocks in 3 are pretty high, but I think there's a good chance both characters are going to be someone new, and I think the character in 2 is pretty likely to just be Jin, Malos, or an OC. That's all I got for this, though. Probably spoke for way too long about a very, very short trailer that told us far less than the Genesis reveal, but that's me for you. Till next time, this is Luxon, signing off.